Good evening and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting round of incredible racing action in the middle of the pack. Racing League fall into Porsche Cup Championship for 2025 has brought to you on the premier sim racing platform available only on PC, known as iRacing. It is time for round number 6 of 8, and we have made our way to Japan for a Japanese doubleheader that begins in the countryside of the region of Okayama. It is none other than the Okayama International Circuit. Located near the city of Mimasaka, it is a circuit that was once crowned as the host of Japan's second Formula 1 Grand Prix, which would operate under the name of the Pacific Grand Prix. However, that idea was very quickly tabled as a result of the remoteness of the circuit, and therefore this circuit has gradually taken a step back, if you will, from being on the international stage to one more focused on the domestic and national stage, with being a regular host to Super GT, Super Formula Light, and many other homegrown series on an annual basis. At its core, a 2.31 mile length circuit, 11 corners, but what makes it unique is its rapid fire direction changes. You'll find most of the corners around here come in pairs, if not triplets, and what it does mean is that overtaking around here is just that extra little bit difficult. Whereas at most circuits, a quick dive to the inside can guarantee you a great opportunity to try and make a move. Here, if you go the inside into one corner, you very quickly find yourself on the outside for the next corner, and therefore it gives your defending rival the opportunity to go back on the counter-attack immediately. And that balancing act is what our drivers will need to master today if they want to be able to come away victorious. Alas, where are my manners? Allow me to welcome you all to this post-round broadcast live from circuit side for your viewing pleasure as you tune in today on one of two media platforms available to you. Firstly, you can be tuning in on YouTube at youtube.com and search for TX11TX or Turty Paul Walsh, and welcome to you guys and girls tuning in via YouTube. And of course, you do have the ability to also tune in via Twitch at twitch.tv/TX11, and welcome to you guys and girls tuning in via Twitch. Now, regardless of what platform you tune in on, you'll have the same commentary team in the booth, and it's myself who brings you all the commentary from all the racing this season. My name is Paul Walsh, also known as TX11 or Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on, and I will bring you all your racing action as it unfolds. As we do say hello there to the time consumer in the YouTube chat, and don't be shy, ladies and gentlemen, feel free to say hi, let us know how you're doing, and if you're having a bit of a frowny day, well, let's turn it into a smiley day. Let's turn that frown upside down and make sure you're plenty entertained. But as we come into this round then, in terms of our schedule for this post-round broadcast, with the racing having occurred earlier this week on Wednesday the 12th of November 2025, but we're bringing it to you as if it were live this Sunday the 16th of November, well, as we can see in terms of times of Greenwich Mean Time, that's GMT, or Universal Coordinate Time UTC, we'll be going into our qualifying session in just shy of 6 minutes time at 5:10 this afternoon. It'll be 10 minutes in length, after which we'll make our way to the grid for our 6th race of the season. Our 35-minute sprint race awaits, and that will be at 5:20. And it's crazy to think, next time out, we'll be wrapping up all our sprint races, and the week after that, it'll be our season finale, our second and only one of two feature races. This season is absolutely flying us by as we make our way closer and closer towards Christmas. But coming into this round then, let's recap the story thus far and what is lying in wait. Because as we can see, last time out in round number 5, we were at the Motorland Aragon circuit. The outer loop variant of the circuit, playing host to a rather limited number of our drivers, no more than 10 able to make the round. However, on the 5th of November, it really was a demonstration of quality over quantity, and Matt Best articulated that most, having qualified on pole and very quickly falling away to the back of the order after an opening corner incident with Mark Senegal. The two were able to quickly talk about it and resolve it after the race, but unfortunately for Matt Best, it meant that victory had to come the hard way, but he did claw his way all the way through the field to take the overall and pro win. Meanwhile, in the AM class, Mark Senegal looked to be the favourite, given the fact he absolutely dominated qualifying compared to championship leader Shahi Zaher seemingly to struggle, but it was in the race where Shahi Zaher was able to gradually take the lead little by little, despite having some major pressure put on him by a debutant of Joshua Dillon, who kept the pressure on for the opening 7 laps, only to run out of tyre life and then have to settle for falling backwards into the clutches of the podium. But here at Okayama today, we could see a very different story play out, particularly given the fact we've had a lot of rain on the forecast coming into this round. The practice session has been blighted by some wet spots. We could see that in qualifying, and we could even see the rain in the race, and therefore it could completely turn things upside down, and indeed the rain always has a habit of doing that. But after today, we'll make it away to Motegi for what will be the second of our Japanese header rounds, and that'll be at the Twin Ring Motegi circuit, now known as Mobility Sport Motegi, and then we'll be bringing things to a close, of course, with round number 8 on the 26th of November at the Phillip Island Grand Prix circuit down under in Australia. And that'll wrap up, of course, the middle of the pack cup as well. We're coming into this round in terms of championship standings. Started with the overall Drivers' Championship standings, which have the Pro and the AM classes. In the Pros, Matt Best now leads by 18 points over Jason Landry. Understandably, Landry not on the grid for the second half of this season due to a change in personal circumstances. He's massively missed. However, it does open up the opportunity here for Matt Best to try and run away with proceedings. And arguably, the main yardstick he now has to compare himself to is Tom Bryce, who sits in third, who is 47 points behind. And that advantage is continuing to increase in the favour of the Texas Speed Sim Racing driver of Best. But Bryce right now has to worry about the growing charger likes of Daniel McConnell, who sits in fourth at 114 points, and only 8 behind him is Jaden Calloway, and it is a further, 18 points there to Julian Jones. Don't rule out David Adeyi either, who's 2 points behind, nor James Logston, who's a further 6 afield, and Edwin Offeret and Justin Braggan complete your Pro Championship standings after 5 rounds. And right now, Best seems to be running away and making himself the favourite, but the question of who is going to finish second and third place is definitely on the cards. Meanwhile, in the AM class, we can see that Shahi Zaher, in the absence of his championship rival Blake Phillips, he's been able to increase his advantage by a slender degree. We say it's slender because it's only the best part of 13 points before you do get to second place, man. Second for the first time this season in the championship now of Mark Senegal, who really has been third favourite to Blake Phillips. However, he's been able to move ahead, but with Phillips back on the grid today, understandably, it is going to be a big question of whether the two end up fighting each other more than they get the opportunity to fight Zuhair. And therefore, I wouldn't want to get between the trio because right now, of course, Zuhair does have most of the wins, with Blake Phillips taking 1 win this season, and Mark Senegal has none. So in theory, the Canadian driver will be very keen to prove a point, which is that he can also win races, but we'll have to wait and see whether we can do that here. Glenn Bratton, he's only a further 9 points adrift in fourth, but he's only 1 point ahead of Jermaine Warren. And then we do have outside the top 5 a sizable 46-point gap to Billman DaCosta, who's only 1 point ahead of Nick Bader, with Alan Law, then Joshua Dillon and Anthony Piper completing your top 10. And the debutants of Dillon and Piper both impressing on their debut last time out. And we look forward to seeing plenty more for them today as they continue to get to grips with the Porsche 992 GT3 Cup machine. As for the Cup standings for the second half of the season, well, as we can see coming into this round, leading in the Pro classes middle of the pack cup is Matt Best on 53 points. And he's carved himself a rather favourable advantage given the fact a good number of AM tries finished between him and Tom Bryce and Daniel McConnell, so therefore Best will be looking to continue to do that today. As for in the AM class, meanwhile, Shahi Zaher stuck his stake in the ground immediately, but only has a 3-point advantage over Mark Senegal, with further 2 points to Jermaine Warren. And Jermaine Warren's always one to watch out for, to be fair, because he does come on strong and later on in the season typically, and Glenn Bratton does the same, only 2 points adrift in fourth place, with Joshua Dillon and Anthony Piper completing the Cup standings. So let's talk a little bit about our circuit for today, because you know the pitch coming into this round, but picture where we're going to be. And it is the Okayama International Circuit's full course, located, as we said earlier, near the city of Mimasaka in the Okayama Prefecture of Japan. 11 corners, all brilliantly mapped out here, and a big thank you to iRacing.com, not just for their brilliant simulator, but also the fantastic track maps that contained within it. And these corners, many of them drawing on inspiration from the United Kingdom, what of this circuit originally being host to private racing set up by a set of privateers, and very quickly finding that British drivers, including none others as Sterling Moss, making their way to this Japanese circuit to race on it and to try it out and give their thoughts and really celebrate what is an absolutely brilliant and understated circuit. But as the drivers make their way around here, they won't be thinking about the names of the corners, they'll be thinking about how to get them right. First corner, turn number 1 there, being a sweeping right-hander of a very late apex that gives rise to Williams Bend at turn number 2. A much tighter to the apex style corner, but the idea is if you can go as late as possible, you can get the power down and make your way flat out through the Moss S at turn number 3 and into the uphill Atwood curve at turn number 4. Going to the highest point of the circuit at turn number 4, our drivers will roar the way down the extended back straight before making their way into the heavy braking zone that is the hairpin at turn number 5, with plenty of road camber there, giving our drivers the opportunity to attack around the outside as much as the inside, and that will set them up then into Revolver and Piper at turns 6 and 7, a double left that gives way then into an S sequence of hairpins at turns 8 and 9 at Hobbs, and Redmond before it. It's uphill as well through there, so plenty of camber to deal with, plus also the fact it's left into right, and our drivers there can go 2 wide all the way through, but they'll have to be 1 wide by the time they get to White Knight corner at turn number 10, as always somebody will be off into the gravel, if not at last corner at turn number 11, and that will be a lap of the circuit. But as for our rules, a quick reminder before we go racing, of course, setup wise, the drivers are running a fixed setup as provided by the Middle of the Pack Racing League, with fuel levels restricted to 40%, and in terms of our qualifying session, which is just about to get underway, well, what we can tell you is the fact that a closed qualifying format shall be used as lasting 10 minutes. Sprint race-wise, well, the race shall start by a standing start, as is the tradition of Porsche Cup racing, and we'll see that each driver has one fast repair available should they need to use it, but otherwise we're not expecting any pit stops beyond that, or a drive-through penalty should they accumulate 15 or more instant points. But that's enough rules, regulation, everything in between. You're all here for the racing, and so are we. So therefore, ladies and gentlemen, what we are going to do is we are going to make our way back to circuit side, and as we do, we'll give us a brief moment there to bring things up on screen, and here we go as we make our way back. Well, qualifying is very much underway, already a minute into it almost, and our drivers all out there on their initial outlaps at the moment, trying to get themselves warmed up as much as possible. Now, you may be asking the question, how important is qualifying here then? Well, given the fact this circuit is very difficult to overtake at, even for the very best of drivers, track position is going to be a little bit more valuable compared to most circuits on this calendar. And if you can put the car on pole, you've got a very good opportunity to be able to defend all the way to the end of the race. However, defending well here does take a lot of life out of the tyres because of the fact you've got so many high-load corners around here and the continual direction changes. And for a circuit that is clockwise, end-to-end, it does feel as though you have a very even distribution of tyre wear around here, and that's going to be something that our drivers will need to manage. Because even tyre wear is a lot better than one-sided tyre wear. Because if you have more wear on one side of the car than the other, so more wear on the right-hand side of the car compared to the left-hand side of the car, it means every time you go into a left-hand corner, you have a lot less grip compared to your right-handers, and therefore you have to play a bit of a balancing act. Whereas if you've got equal degradation across all four tyres or both sides of the car, it means naturally your pace does fall off over the race distance, but you have a much more comfortable approach to each and every lap, and actually the lap times do not drop off as much as they would if there's excessive tyre wear on one side. So therefore tyre management in the race will be just as valuable as putting the car on pole in qualifying, and it all comes down to the braveness with regards to trying to make moves. And one driver who is no stranger to being brave when trying to make overtaking moves, he's on screen right now for Bear Pope Zero, the pro driver James Logston, back on the grid today after a brief break, and as he does return to this series, he was on the grid earlier on this season, of course. Very happy to see the 42 driver out here giving it his all today, and can he potentially still win away from this man, Matt Best for Texas Speed Sim Racing, the number 11 driver right now, who really is the man to beat. He may not be the fastest, he hasn't been the fastest on paper all season, but he has been the most consistent, and that is how he grafts out wins, to be fair. When he's not the fastest driver, he just simply doesn't make mistakes, and right now, make no mistake, he is looking very quick here in this qualifying session, albeit purple sectors swinging left, right and centre between himself, Jaden Calloway, and also James Logston. So all three drivers right now trying to go for the ultimate prize, and that being, of course, in the pro and overall categories. Meanwhile, in the AM class, well, Shahi Zahir, the championship leader for ITD West, he's looking quite happy with the balance of the car right now, even though it is a fixed setup. It is a setup you have to get acquainted to, and it does change sometimes week in, week out. But right now, making no changes at the moment is the fact that Zuhair is right up there, it would seem, as we're going to get those first qualifying laps coming onto the board very shortly, and we look forward to seeing who exactly is going to put themselves up there. Well, the benchmark is set with 32.876 at best, with Callaway a second off there, and was Zuhair crosses the timeline. He goes into second on 33.633. That's 3/4 of a second slower than best. Mark Senegal goes faster by the best part of 2 tenths there. Oh, as that's a big lock up there into turn number 1. And, well, I think a bit too eager on the brakes. And in the end, he'll have to tow out the gravel zone and make his way back to the pit lane. And, well, he will use up one of his available laps there. They do have a limited number of laps as well as the 10 minutes. I do believe it's the best part of 3 laps plus the out laps. So we will be seeing some of our drivers in qualifying a little bit prematurely. Shahi's here makes his way around then for another lap. But meanwhile, we do have a regular face back on the grid today, and indeed many of you may remember him for Caboose Crew. Here he is, it's Carl Peterson as he makes his way on around. He's back in the AM class here in the 250. Very happy to see him back on the grid, and indeed Carl has been one of those drivers who's been one of the rising stars of the Middle Pack Racing League community over the last couple of years. Ever since making his debut a year and a half ago, he has gradually risen and enjoyed some absolutely brilliant battles in the AM class, even taking a podium or 2 over the course of his career. And indeed many may remember some of his memorable racing, particularly when we did go racing around the streets of Chicago, and if my memory serves me correctly, that may have been in Formula 4 cars. And, well, Peterson there put on an absolutely brilliant display, and some would have said he would have won the race if it were not some difficulties midway through. But either way, he's been very tactical in what is F4 cars. He's also raced in the Radicals, he's raced in the Toyota GR86s, and he's always been one of those drivers who's always willing to give it his best, and that's why we love to see him on the grid, albeit this will be the hardest challenge he's faced at the Middle of the Pack Racing League, given the fact that he does have this Porsche Cup car at his fingertips right now. And, well, whereas we've normally run cars with, on average, somewhere in the region of 200 to 300 brake horsepower, albeit they've perhaps been much lighter than this Porsche Cup car, particularly in the case of the Radicals and also the Formula 4s. Well, here today you have a 510 horsepower behemoth of machine from Germany, and this is the Porsche 992.1 Cup car that will be departing iRacing as of next season. As of the 2026 Season 1 update, we will be seeing the arrival of its Mark II variant, and that is going to see a lot of changes, albeit focusing on the here and now. Of course, these cars, why they're so difficult to drive, is the fact you have a lot of horsepower. You also have an engine that's over the rear axle, as is the typical design of Porsche engineering, rear engine, rear wheel drive, but also you have no anti-lock braking system, so no ABS. That's why you saw Mark Senegal lock up into turn 1, because he was a little bit late into the braking zone, and then went full onto the brakes and locked up. But you also have no traction control system. Our drivers have to do all the traction control. It's called managing your right foot, and as we do see Glenn Bratton doing very well to do so, making his way through the hairpin, it means these cars right now really do come down to the driver being in harmony with the machine. However, next season we are seeing a switch to the Porsche 992.2 Cup car, and with it as well we are seeing the introduction of a different electronics packages. And as I do understand it, we have had confirmation that the ABS will be active on those cars. Traction control is still to be decided. However, the ABS will be the biggest change, for the simple reason you do not have the risk of locking up anymore, because the anti-lock braking system removes that risk. However, that is not to say the cars do not become easier. In fact, if anything, they become even more difficult to drive, because you have to then figure out how exactly you avoid triggering the ABS excessively, because the more ABS usage, the more tyre usage you have, and front brake heating you'll also have. Plus, also what you've got to consider is the fact that the Porsche Cup cars will have a power increase when they go to the Mark II variant, and I believe that power increase in the best part of 20 to 30 horsepower, which means they get even quicker, and you approach these corners at even higher speeds. But right now, as we're coming very quickly to the conclusion of qualifying, David Adeyemi jumps to the top in the Pro class for ITD West, and was a 32.176, 300ths faster than James Logsdon, and Jaden Callaway meanwhile in third place, as Matt Best has only been able to marshal himself to a fourth place right now, 7/10 off the pole. In the AM class meanwhile, well, it's Mark Senegal who's put the reference marker up there, pole position by what is 2/10 over Shahi Zahair, and you've still got Blake Phillips out there, but he comes to line, and he does not improve on his third and final qualifying lap, so Phillips decides in the end to settle for third place. And, well, I think he's going to be quite safe there, as we are still waiting for some lap times from Jermaine Warren, Billman DaCosta and Anthony Piper. But right now, Phillips definitely getting the job done nice and early to put himself in the contention today. And he's not too far off the pace as a hair in Senegal. But we do also have, you may have noticed, some wet spots out there, or some damp patches in this qualifying session. We've still got some puddles at certain points, particularly on corner exits. And that's why drivers are avoiding using the exit curves as much as possible, because those are going to feel as though you're driving on an oil slick. There is no grip on those curves by default in sunny conditions. However, you run out to them for the simple reason it extends the corner, and it extends the amount of speed you can carry out of it. In wet conditions, meanwhile, a slippery curb is only going to hurt you massively. When the tyres try to spin up, there'll be no grip available. So therefore, if you touch those curbs, you touch them at your risk. Some of them you can touch at the moment, it would seem, such as the last corner. Gentle touch there for David Adeyemi. And as he crosses the timeline this time, can he raise the bar even higher from 32.176? No, he cannot. That's going to be the highest he goes in terms of his lap times. However, I think he'll feel confident he's got that pole position, as Daniel McConnell, the other Texas Speed Sim racing driver, gets the closest all season to his teammate Matt Best, only 3.5 tenths between the two of them. And well, it looks though here our drivers are parking up now. But as they do, we are not too far away from going into what will be the gridding procedure. As meanwhile, we do have there Shahi's there parked up at the end of the pit lane. We sit on board with him, and I think he'll be looking over the data from the team and trying to understand what exactly has he missed out on to miss out on that AM pole position. Presuming these lap times are valid, of course, well then it'll be of his mindset, which is that things have not come together and he needs a little bit more time. Jermaine Warren, Billman DaCosta and Anthony Piper have opted not to go qualifying, and therefore that means they will be starting for the very back of the grid, but that's not necessarily a bad idea here, particularly if you're expecting more rain to come or changeable conditions, and we will have to wait and see what exactly those conditions bring to the table. So the circuit falls mostly silent, although Daniel McConnell's still going to give us a little bit of a grandstand moment here as he makes his way down the back straight, but then he decides, actually, you know what, it's not worth it, I'm going to save the car up. He does park up to do a practice start there, and you see the wheel spin as he tries to get underway, and well, those tyres are going to feel a little bit damp as he makes his way down the back stretch. A tiny little bit of spray off the back of the car. That shows you how limited the water is out there. But that is qualifying complete, ladies and gentlemen, and without further ado, let's make our way to the grid for our 6th race of the season. So our drivers make the way onto the grid, and as they do, this is how they'll line up then for our visit to the Okayama International Circuit in round 6 of 8 in the middle of the pack Racing League Fall Into Porsche Cup Championship for 2025, brought to you on iRacing. And as we can see, taking pole position overall in Pro, it is David Adeyi, who returns to the top for ITD West Senior Vice Presidents by 300 over James Logston for Bear Pope 0. An incredibly close qualifying session between the pair, but in the end, it is the number 32 that beats the 42. Jaden Callaway, meanwhile, he sits precisely between them in terms of his door number, but precisely behind them when it comes to that third place for ITD West, a further 3 tenths of field. But he was ahead of Texas Speed Sim Racing's Matt Best, who lines up 4 tenths behind in 4th place. In 5th, it was Daniel McConnell, who almost matched his teammate for Texas Speed Sim Racing, with Mark Senegal then starting 6th. Your pole sitter for the AM class, he'll be very happy with that, and this will feel as though it's a bit of a repeat of what happened at what was none other than the Motorland Aragon circuit a week ago. However, he'll be hoping that this time he can have a much better run in towards turn number 1. If he does not, well, Shahi Zahel will be looking to capitalise, starting from 7th on the grid for ITD West Senior Vice Presidents. The Sri Lankan trial then be followed up on the 4th row of the grid by Blake Phillips, his main championship rival at this time for Le Pit Club Sim Racing. And then we do have Tom Bryce starting 9th for ITD West Interns Pro Esports Division, and the pro driver in the company of the AM of Carl Peterson, who on his return to the grid starts 10th today for Caboose Crew. Outside that top 10, starting at 11th is none other than Julian Jones, with the ITD West Interns Pro Esports Division driver joined by Glenn Bratton, and the privateer then followed up by fellow privateer Jermaine Warren, with Billman Acosta starting in 14th place, not setting a valid lap time alongside Warren for Bear Pope 0, and then it will be Anthony Piper who starts last but not least if he makes it to the grid in 15th place. So 15 drivers here today, all very eager to make a good impression, ladies and gentlemen, but it looks like Piper may not be making the grid. The lights going on, the racing is only seconds away. And it's a lights out and away we go here for round number 6 of the championship as our drivers charged away in towards turn number 1. It's a good start there from Best, goes between the leaders, and as he makes way in towards turn number 1, takes the lead. But as we can see there, James Logston now started to build up a little bit after a slow start. Looking around the outside there versus Adeyi, and feeling robbed to the pair will by Matt Best. Best having an incredible start to his race, but as they make the way on the way right now, they've got 35 minutes to try and make amends, but 2 wide as they come through the Mosset. Still 2 wide then in towards turn number 4, and Atwood curve. Logston will get ahead for now. Blake Phillips as well. He's had a great start. Has got into the AM lead ahead of Zahair and Senegal. And Mark Senegal having a safer start this time around. However, he's not been able to hold on to that AM lead. And I wonder whether his caution has perhaps cost him to a degree. But now down the back straight they go. And Logston here having to go defensive again. Braking nice and late versus Adeyi. He's got those tyres up to temperature and those brakes with it immediately. He's really got himself dialed in as Logston. Meanwhile, Adeyi not fighting it too hard here, playing the patience game. As further back, there's a big lock up there for Jermaine Warren. He falls back off the back of Carl Peterson. He's got Glenn Bratton and Bill DaCosta for company. And unfortunately, I have had confirmation in my ear that Anthony Piper's team are not going to be able to get the car out due to a technical issue with it, and therefore it's going to sit in the pit lane. So we have lost 1 driver before we go green flag racing. It's a shame, but we'll hopefully see Piper back on the grid next time out at the Mobility Resort Motegi. But as we do have Jaden Callaway in full place here, he's got Daniel McConnell with him. The 3 leaders are now pulling away, and Callaway really leading the rest of the field on around come the end of lap number 1, it would seem. That's only going to lead to even more brilliant racing here, because everyone will want to pinch the points off of Callaway as best they can. But 1 lap down, more to come, and it's Matt Best who leads by only 3 tenths. They head down towards turn number 1 for the second time of asking. Logston sits in 2nd, Adeyi in 3rd, then Callaway is a 2nd behind in 4th. Then we have got Daniel McConnell in 5th. AM leader Blake Phillips sits in 6th, ahead of Shahi Zahair, and then Mark Senegal. That's your top 3 in the AM class. Then in 9th place it's Julian Jones, the pro, ahead of Tom Bryce, with Carl Peterson wrapping up the top at 11. And best the rest there as he steps very deep at turn number 1. Jermaine Warren almost follows him, and Glenn Bratton almost does the same. But looks like all those drivers are safe up through, and Billman Acosta meanwhile completes your running order of 14 drives to Bear Pope 0. But he's still got a little bit of time in this race, and he'll be very gradually looking to try and move himself forward as quickly as he possibly can. But all these drivers right now are really now in the zone. They'll have the tyre temperature, they'll have the brake temperature as well. And right now Matt Best weaving on around there. No rain falling at the moment. We just have what is the idle damp patches out, the small puddles, and what remnant surface water from the rain that came before the practice session today. But Best there making sure not to take too many risks. I suspect all these drivers will be on a slick tyre, and therefore they'll be trying to make sure they keep all the heat in it, but they'll only be able to use certain parts of the circuit. For example, coming down the inside here in towards turn number 8 might be a bit too dangerous given the fact they've got some water on that inside line, as Best right now has a huge amount of pressure growing here from Logston, who really after that slow start is now all over the back of the Texas Speed Sim Racing number 11. and will best absolutely nail the launch, that's for certain. But right now, can he nail the defensive drive for the remaining 32 minutes? Keep in mind, of course, that we sometimes do expect a pit stop, sometimes we do not. It all comes down to essentially how much fuel they're able to save and how long they can go on the tank, albeit the theory over so far this season has been there will be one mandated pit stop for fuel, but it'll be a quick splash and dash. But given the fact we do have wet conditions here today, that normally means fuel usage is a bit less compared to dry conditions. Could we see anybody potentially attempt the no stop? Well, we will only find out as time wears on. But best here right now, just keeping his head down here with Logston and Adiyi staying with him as they make their way onto this third tour of the circuit under race conditions. And in terms of your AM leaders, well, there's Blake Phillips with Shahi Zahair and Mark Senegal close on by, albeit Senegal falling backwards a little bit. And if anything, Julian Jones now is starting to eye this up. Now, you may be wondering with regards to what is the racing around here in terms of, do the AM drivers need to fight the pros and vice versa? The short answer is they have a decision to make, because you score points based on your overall finishing position, not your class finishing position. The only exception is that the AM class is 3 points for the winning class, 2 for second and 1 in third. They are bonus points on top of the grand total points that you can get from your overall position, of which the biggest accolade is the overall win, and that is worth 50 points, and then it goes down in patches of what is 2 points, so 50 to 48, etc. So that's why if you're an AM driver and a pro driver, either one of you, you'll fight each other just as much as you'll fight your other class drivers, because you want every position for every single point in the championship. But the AMs do have to just think a little bit more about the fact, is it worth fighting for the overall position when you could also fight your class rivals for the bonus points out there? It is a bit of a tactical position to be in, whereas the pros, meanwhile, no, they've got to pick off everybody they can in order to score as well as possible. As we head on to the next lap, well, Best still leading here for now. Can he extrapolate a bit of an advantage? It looks as though he can't at the moment, as David Adiyi sets the fastest lap of the race at a 32.335. So therefore, Adiyi starting just to get into the momentum. As we ride on board here with James Logston for Bear Poke 0. Can we find out exactly where he's got a little bit of speed? Well, not quite sure at the moment, as I'm slightly distracted there by what's written on the back of Best's car, which is thanks John's mum. Now, I'm trying to understand who that is in reference to there. I'm sure Matt might be able to tell me when I catch up with him in the week ahead. But right now, I've never noticed that on the car before, but good to see that today. And I wonder if that's in reference to a member of the community at the Middle of the Pack Racing League, or whether it's in reference to somebody at Texas Speed Sim Racing. But either way, as they roar the way down, here comes Logston looking up the inside. And well, in the end, he's not going to be able to make the move there. He's going to have to wait his turn. And it does seem as though right now, everybody just pinching and inching forward. And it is starting to get a little bit dicey as the clouds are starting to blacken over the circuit as well. I wonder if we've got some rain coming, because it is getting quite dark as I look out my commentary booth window, particularly towards the back end of the circuit. And if rain were to fall, and they're all out there on slick tyres at the moment, one would imagine there's going to be a question of, do you dive to the pits to change the tyre to the wet compound, or do you try to brave it on the slick, depending on when the rain is coming and how much is coming? Well, we will see. As meanwhile, hold the phone, that's a move from Shahi Zahair at the inside of Blake Phillips, and that is to hold on to and take the lead of the AM class. And well, Phillips has lost it. Meanwhile, Zahair takes it for a brief moment, and Senegal is still there looking for an opportunity to get involved if he can. But goodness me, Blake Phillips right now, he's not letting this go whatsoever as they head up towards what will be turn number 1. And well, you can see how close Phillips is there as they get ready to go into the braking zone. But he opts not to make the move here as we ride aboard with the pickup sim racing driver. He's very eager, but of course, he's got to take his time with this one, because if he tries to go for a move at the wrong place, it may cost him not just the place, it may cost the pair of them the opportunity versus Mark Senegal, who is watching from behind and is trying to play the patience game. And as they make their way into the braking zone here for turn number 4, Phillips there, he's really right now on the edge of wanting to make the move. You can feel it in the way he's trying to drive the car there. I think he second guessed himself under braking and thought, I'm not going to be able to go for the move. Zahair broke a little bit earlier than Phillips did there, and you notice the way Phillips actually pulls the steering wheel slightly to the right in preparation for needing to release the brake if it started to lock and let the car roll up the inside. And that's a sign where Phillips right now is in the 50-50 zone. He thinks he's got the pace to stay with Zahair, but he also thinks he might have the pace to make a move, but he's not sure whether to go for it or not, and that hesitation may cost him later on, particularly if he ends up locking up the brakes at any point. That could prove very costly, but not so at the moment. And Phillips showing a very good job here after missing last round. Well, right now, I can tell you one thing. That extra week break, since what has been the midpoint of the season, it has not dulled his racing abilities whatsoever. If anything, it seems to have only heightened them. but out of the corner he comes, and as he now makes his way on towards turn number 10, we'll wait to see what Phillips could do from there, as we are back to the front of the field, and Matt Best does the poor run out of the final quarter. Logsdon tucks in behind, follows him religiously here down the start for this straight, and as they get ready to go to the brakes here, well, right now, Logsdon thinking about it, David Adie is there as well. This top three very close together, and this could all come down to whether somebody makes a mistake. As somebody has made a mistake, I think that was Glenn Bratton who ran wide there on the previous lap and has sent gravel over the circuit at turn 1. That doesn't help either, getting dirt on the tyres. That will only make the grip levels decrease for a brief mode. As we are further back, this is Jermaine Warren up the inside of Carl Peterson for 4th place in the AM class, but a bit of water there on the apex curb causes Warren to slide sideways. Understeer invoked. Peterson now looking around the outside here, but as we said earlier, one move on the inside switches to a move around the outside, and Warren there, we just lose out to Peterson as they head in towards the boss S, and right now all Carl Peterson needs to do is hold his ground towards Atwood curve if he dares to do so, but in the end on that inside line he doesn't want to risk it. He lifts off there, known as some water on the inside curve, and as a result Jermaine Warren takes the place back, but brilliant battling between them, and I think that's a build up to what could happen later on, as meanwhile we're back to your leaders for a brief moment. Best, Logsdon, Adie still all together here as we're nearing the end of the first 10 minutes of the race, and we've got some replays to show you as well from the race start, particularly how Matt Best took the lead of this race with an absolute lightning launch, and also some of the moments from later on, particularly the off tracks of Glenn Bratton and Billman DaCosta, which have seen them fall a little bit further down the order, but we'll come to those shortly. Let's finish this lap first to see whether Best's under more pressure as he runs out wide there at turn number 10, and Mike Knight corner there almost claiming Best, as he really right now is under so much pressure, and in that mental space, James Logsdon, he's an absolute devil for this. He just knows how to get under a driver's skin. He did it to Jason Landry in the GT3 Championship years ago, but he gets under his own skin. Logsdon breaks himself into turn 1. It's into the barrier there. He goes into a swamp of gravel, which is all absolutely slick, and as a result, he can't get the car stopped, and well, James Logsdon does get it going again. He rebounds off the tyre barrier rather than gets entrenched in it, but Logsdon there making a mistake. That's a rarity to see Logsdon make a mistake under braking, but gets caught out, and as a result, now Best is given a bit of a reprieve, but Logsdon will be very eager to try and come back when he can, as we do say hello to MOP Jabril in the Twitch chat there, and well, I hope you're doing well, good sir, as all these drivers right now continue to push onwards, but James Logsdon there with a major error puts him down to 8th place overall. There's Julian Jones, fellow pro driver company, right behind, and now he's got to try and recover his way all the way back up the order in good time. But with that, we're going to take a look back at some moments from earlier in the race, including what just happened there. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we begin our trilogy of replays with what was the race start from Matt Best. Here's the on-board from Best's perspective, starting 4th on this grid. The Texas Speed Sim Racing driver dropped the hammer there, and look at the launch. My goodness, whereas everyone else was still spinning the wheels, Best absolutely timed that to perfection and took the lead by the braking zone into turn number 1, and nobody else really knew what else to do. We take a look back at that, meanwhile, from the onboard of Jaden Callaway, and this was Callaway as he was getting himself set. Let's listen in. And in the end held the revs quite low there to avoid the wheel spin, but as a result bogged down in first gear, and Best just swiped his way through that. I don't think Callaway expected that to happen, and I don't think the leaders expected it either, but an incredible start from Matt Best. We then had this happen on lap number 4 for Glenn Bratton. And this was it all going wrong for Glenn Bratton coming into what was the final corner, in fact. So we were incorrect on them going off at turn number 1. And he went very wide there and brought some gravel back with him, chasing after what was Jermaine Warren at the time. Oh, and as he went to rejoin, the left-hand side tyres there with no grip. The rear right tyre spinning up as he tried to get the power down and had to rejoin again after a spin, but thankfully not in the wall. And then we had this for Billman DaCosta on lap number 5. So this was only moments later as he made his way on down into the braking zone for turn number 1. And, well, was it similar to what happened to James Logsdon? No, almost, in fact, locked up there, but wasn't quite as wide on initial entry, and well, ran to the tyre barrier, but thankfully just glanced it, if that. And then, of course, we had this for James Logsdon. Then what was the start of lap number 7, looking for the move on Matt Best as the sun shone, but in the end the sun wasn't shining on him, it was shining on Matt Best as Logsdon missed his braking zone, locking up there, being so close behind and straight to the barrier. Well, an easy mistake to make for even the very best it would seem. And let's go back to your live racing, ladies and gentlemen. So more to come, no doubt about it, as our drivers continue to press on here. And, well, the racing right now, it's going to only build up to a natural crescendo as we come back to your leader. And in the rear of the picture, that's Daniel McConnell taking a step wide. How he's doing a brilliant job in 4th place there. And Texas Speed Sim Racing right now, you never know, they could be on for a double podium. All it takes is a brief mistake from one of the ITD West drivers behind Best, and Sonny McConnell will be right there in the hunt, and that would be a huge achievement for the team. But as they head onwards, meanwhile, oh my goodness, there's been a bit of drama here at the final quarter. I believe that's Tom Bryce rejoining there. Jermaine Warren's going to be catching up to him very quickly, but Mark Senegal has made his way through. Warren, meanwhile, has made his way upwards, as James Logston is into the pit lane. Now, as he makes his way on down pit row, I believe this will be for a strategic stop. So it is Logston who's decided to pull himself out of the pack, and this is intentional in order to take the fuel he needs to get to the end of the race and give himself plenty of clear track. He doesn't want to fight anymore because fighting costs time. And speaking of fighting, we come right back to your leaders here, and this is number 11 of Best, keeping Adi behind, at least there for the hairpin. But as they head in towards turns 6 and 7 here, the double left, this is where things only get more and more challenging now for the aggressor, because the thing is there's only really one wide through there in dry conditions, and in wet conditions it gets even harder. It's here at turns 8 and 9 where a dive to the inside, of course, puts you on the outside for the next quarter. So it's all about mental pressure here, but you'll notice the body language of Best's car, and what he's doing is quite interesting in the fact that whilst he is the lead car going into the first corner at turn number 8, and any of these corner sequences where you've got multiple quarters with direction changes going into the next corner, he is naturally putting the car in the middle of the road for the second corner in the sequence, and that is to stop the driver from behind, Adi in this instance, having the confidence to think they can dive up the inside. Now, as they make the way down towards turn 1, Adi doing a little bit of weaving in behind Best there, trying to follow the leader for the slipstream, but I wonder whether Adi would actually be better placed just holding his line, because the thing is, by Best doing this weaving, what he's also signalling to the drivers behind is he's not confident he can hold that position unless he has to break the tire and give himself every minuscule advantage. But the one thing about weaving is, if you're driving down a straight, weaving along it compared to driving in a straight line naturally increases the distance. And of course, the idea is you want to break the slipstream, but you're also increasing the length of time you spend down that straight, and you're also adding in a minuscule amount of extra tyre wear, which in these conditions, that could actually mean something towards the end. But we will see. It's very small. The margins are marginal, as I like to say. And as Best continues to defend, Adi looking around the outside again, trying to use the camber of the road there to push himself round the corner, but he knows that gravel on the outside, he doesn't want to touch that, so he's either got to be ahead by the time he gets to the midpoint of the corner, or he's got to back off, because he knows touching that gravel is only going to hurt him. And Jaden Callaway is building up here behind as we ride on board the third man in this running order, and indeed it's becoming a bit of a menage a trois at the moment as they head onto the brakes. Adi goes a bit deep there, really rolling onto the back of Best's car. That dirty air and the overspeed there, and also a little bit of hypnotism essentially kicking at this point. When you're that close to the car in front, obviously mentally what you start to do is you start to look at that car more than you do look at your braking zones, because you're so focused on it. As Best has a big slide for the final quarter, rear of the car steps out, Best under pressure this time. Here comes Adi as he looks, but Best goes straight to the pit wall here, defending as hard as possible. It says to Adi, try your worst, but Adi says no, I'll give it my best. And Callaway here right now, he's got the popcorn seat view that we're riding on board with as he makes way through turns 1 into 2. He looks left, he looks right again. No way in this time for Callaway nor for Adi, but Best under tremendous pressure here. And you've got to imagine, what if Logston was in this fight right now? Well, then again, with James Logston opting to take a very early pit stop in order to essentially undercut the field, when in fact, I've just heard in my ear, there's been issues with the car at Bear Pope Zero, and they've decided to retire the car after that impact to the barrier at turn number 1. Something is broken and they haven't been able to fix it, and therefore Logston is out of this race, and it's going to be a big miss there. But that means that ITD West will be absolutely pushing Best the absolute limit, and Adi this time, he's almost there to get in the move into turn number 5. He was 3/4 of the way around the outside and alongside, but in the end it just can't find that final 5% at the moment. He's having to wait. Julian Jones, whoa, he goes up the inside there, Blake Phillips, and in the end, in a battle with his rival from the Pit Club Sim Racing, Julian Jones misses out and goes very wide, and that cost him dearly as a result. And Jones falls back to 7th place now, Phillips regaining 6th place overall. But the damage has been done in terms of the fighting he's had with Jones, means that Zahir is now 4 seconds clear. But then again, Phillips might be able to get this back a bit later on. You never know, to be fair, in terms of how the circuit evolves, and with it, the pace of the drivers evolves over time. But back to the front three, and as we do, well, Addy this time having the worst run out of turn number 11, with their Jaden Callaway getting close, but backing off. And as they do, well, they all scramble in towards turn number 1 here. It's like a pack of what is rabid wolves at the moment. These three all chasing down that win, and Best right now just trying to bring some stability, trying to bring some order to the pack behind him. But everyone wants to be the alpha male in that pack, if you will. They want to be the leader at the moment, and Best is just trying to stamp his authority down as Julian Jones going very slowly down the start for this straight. They released a place to Mark Senegal. Well, trying to understand what's happened there. I wonder he's had a further off track coming out the final corner and decided to take that inside line just to calm the car and also his own nerves down, which, to be fair, when you have multiple offs on the same lap, it can shake you as a driver, even on the simulator. And Sonny, you need to regain your composure and regain your confidence. But there's some confidence for David Adey. This time looks all the way around the outside. He's got a nose ahead. That's where he needs to be. Now can he be on the inside into turn number 6? The gut feeling says yes, he can. And Best loses the lead. Adey had to take 6 laps to get it done, but in the end he's got into lead, and now Best has to play the game of hunter rather than hunted. And he immediately comes back here looking up the inside in towards turn number 8. Best does not want to let it go, but in the end Adey beats him under the braking zone there. And Jaden Callaway now forms the remainder of the ITD West sandwich with that Texas Speed Sim Racing filling. Once they come towards the end of this lap, that's going to be a surprise on the pit. Well, ITD West are going to be absolutely jumping up and down in joy, but the thing is they're not going to drop Best that easily, and now Jaden Callaway is the man who's got to try and find a way through. If he can't, and if he has to sit there in third place, will still be a double podium for the team, but it won't be the result they want. They want a 1-2, but as they make the way onwards, here comes Best back up the inside, and he has the best run out of turn number 11, and will Best immediately there, tucks the inside, and he looks for the switch back here, but Best calls it out, parks it on apex and says, I know what you're trying to do, and he there thinks about putting the nose on the inside in towards turn number 2, but he can't quite, he doesn't want to risk it, and the problem is, again, in dry conditions, you could do it, because you've got the grip available, but in wet conditions, with a curb that's going to have no grip on it whatsoever, you go on there, and if one of the wheels spins up or the car does not slow enough, you're suddenly going to be going into the side of your rival, and that's very quickly going to be also a visit to the steward's room. But as they make the way down the back straight right now, we've had an incredible season of racing so far. Very few incidents reported. I don't think we've had any reported since the season opener to the stewards, and that's been how great the racing has been. But right now, this racing continuing to be absolutely on tenterhooks. Best defending, but here comes Callaway. Callaway now decides to get stuck in versus Adey. Well, that wasn't on the script for the team. Looks at the switch back here. Oh my goodness, and there's contact. There's contact to Callaway as Adey went out wide, lost the rear of the car, had to get it set up, and Callaway was so close there, but in the end, thankfully gets the car under control, does Adey, through that contact, and Callaway gets his car back under control immediately. But the ITD West drivers now stepping on each other's toes here. It's absolute pandemonium. Is it civil war? I don't think so, but it's not far away from it, albeit I do know down at ITD West they encourage their drivers to race each other as much as racing other cars, and the only thing they have is the statement which is don't take each other out of the race. Well, hopefully they don't end up doing that, because we don't want to see that. What we want to see is a part 2 of that one as they make the way on down and start finish straight and go on to another lap. But with that, let's take a brief breather, because we've got plenty more racing to come, but we also need to take a look back at some of the moments from earlier on, including firstly what happened to Tom Bryce. So this was back on lap number 8 for Bryce coming into the final quarter, and the number 72 driver here made his way down the rear of the car, letting go there before he cleared the apex, and you could see the rear was starting to step round, and I wonder if that was an extra downshift there, which in the end kicked the rear of the car around, because it would have overspun the rear wheels, and that's what led to the mistake. We then had this for Julian Jones on lap number 11, I do believe, and this replay courtesy of Arturo Mayorga, and as they made the way on down, up the inside he tried to go versus Blake Phillips, and in the end outbroke himself into the corner. Brilliant attempt, but unfortunately a bit too much enthusiasm and not enough braking force there. But to be fair, you've got to go for it sometimes, and Julian Jones just not having it work out then. We also had this for Jones later on lap number 11. This was, well, in fact, this is the same replay. We do apologise. We're not quite sure what happened at the very end of the lap where he was going slowly, but there's the replay again, and this was Mark Senegal on lap number 12 as he made his way through turn number 3 and in towards Atwood at 4 he went, as he went onto the brakes, in the end didn't brake enough, then had to reapply the brakes again and locked up the front right, and well, he just went slightly off circuit but managed to keep that mostly intact as we do return to your live racing, ladies and gentlemen. And as we come on back, well, still more time to go here and more fighting down the start for this straight. And that is still Best, Adey and Callaway all together. But Callaway is now 9 tenths back here and therefore not really close enough to get involved. Further down the order, we've also got a grand battle between Carl Peterson, Tom Bryce and Jermaine Warren for 9th place, as it is the pro of Bryce who's trying to pick his way past the AMs here of Warren and Peterson. He took Warren on the previous lap. Unfortunately, we don't have a replay of that, but Carl Peterson right now trying to stamp his authority to hold on to this 9th place as he makes his way out the corner. And, well, he definitely has not got any slow over time, as Jermaine Warren, he decides, you know what, if you're going to fight, then I will take myself out of the picture. I will come into the pits and go for the undercut. This is a smart piece of work here from the privateer from middle of the pack racing, because as Warren makes his way into the pit lane, he'll be hoping this undercut could work out for him, but he'll need them to fight each other to make the magic. But as Matt Best here defends versus Adeyeye, well, Adeyeye once again starting to build himself up like the previous time. However, is it worth it now? And I wonder whether ITDS would do well here to get one of their drivers to go for the undercut here and get the other one to stay close. Now, if you wanted to play this the smartest, you would get Callaway to pit at this point, and you would say to Adeyeye, fight as much as possible with Matt, because therefore we can get one driver ahead either on track or through the pit stop. What Matt Best can do, of course, when he wants to, he could choose to come into the pit, and we will have to wait and see. He doesn't this time, nor does Adeyeye. What about Callaway? Does he come in? No, he does not. But I wonder if there's an opportunity here for IT West to split the cars, and therefore cause Best have to make a decision. Does he pit in response, or does he stay out there? But he has to then make sure he doesn't fall into fighting with Adeyeye, which is a lot easier said than done. And now what complicates things is the fact that Glenn Bratton is right in front, who has served a pit stop already, but Bratton is going to be on course to be potentially lapped very shortly, and well, blue flags will wave, but of course keeping in mind that it is the responsibility of the lead lap driver to pass the lap down driver in a safe manner. The lap down driver does not have to completely back off. It's not 4-1 rules here. All they simply need to do is help facilitate the pass when the pass starts to get underway. So therefore there's no expectation that Bratton is only going to relinquish his position. He can choose to do so if he wants to, but right now Best will be hoping for the easiest way on past here, but also he'll be grateful for that. He'll get a bit of a distant tow here heading down the back stretch in towards turn number 5, because this will give him some breathing room to Adeyeye, who over the previous couple of laps, of course, has had the slipstream, whereas Best has not. But as Bratton makes his way out of turn at number 5 and in towards 6, this is the worst place to catch a car, because you've not got much room to operate, and then Bratton then makes way out the corner. Best gets caught up behind, but in the end, Bratton decides to pull over there on the run through turn number 7. We've had to sacrifice a lot of race time, but to be fair to Bratton, that's the best way to do it in such a situation. Well done to him. The privateer will be definitely getting a pat on the back from all three of our leaders come the end of this race. He's done enough there not to make sure that he's essentially obstructed their race, albeit Best will be a little bit annoyed at the fact he's lost that time he did create on the back stretch, but also realise in retrospect the fact there's nowhere else for Glenn to go. And to be fair, Matt does have a very cool head about him as soon as he gets out of the car. Indeed, anybody can get heated in the cockpit, but most of these drivers, if not all of them, they're very respectful to each other and do respect the fact that whilst there are emotions inside the car when you're racing, come the end of it, we're all friends once again. But as they come down towards turn number 1, they come to another lap now, onto a 17th lap with 10 minutes left, and no sign this top 3 opt into pit. Meanwhile, of course, Mark Senegal and Julian Jones, they have spread out a little bit with the pit stop of none other than what was Tom Bryce, and well, in fact, Bryce is coming to the pits, and his race for Bryce is on pit exit here. So as Bryce makes his way out, well, he's had a much longer pit stop compared to what has been Jermaine Warren. Now, with that, I wonder if they put a new set of tyres on Bryce's car. Do they know something we do not? Because we've not had any rainfall, and well, I believe he's gone back out there, and I think he's got on a fresh pair of slicks. From what I understand, we can't quite tell the tyre, then we don't have the data available. But meanwhile, well, let's come back to the lead battle then. Well, as it's going to be a run around the outside, but Adeyeye this time ends up stepping a little bit too wide. And that goes to show you what happens when you try to go all the way round and you're not ahead at the apex. It's the situation whereby you end up running very deep in the corner. Adeyeye pays the price by having to fall back in order. We're coming up the hill and in towards turns 8 to 9. Well, Best is going to cut very shortly behind Billman Da Costa. And well, Da Costa will just be focusing on his race. He tries to fight for 6th place in the AM class versus Glenn Bratton, and also, well, in fact, just Glenn Bratton at this point, it would seem. He makes one in. It's a good time in there for Da Costa. Comes on in, and for Best, he'll be very happy at that, in the fact that he won't have to worry about putting a lap on a car coming down into other tighter corners on the circuit. Indeed, he has a long run up towards turn number 1, but the only problem is he doesn't have any slipstream here to work with, as pit stops are definitely now getting underway, and if they don't get underway very shortly, well, those fuel tanks are definitely going to be starting to chug towards empty. And well, nobody wants to be the driver who makes it the situation where they become the first driver to retire from the race with not enough fuel in the car, or forgetting to pit, in other words. As they head around right now, Best definitely holding on and having to really balance this race very finely, but he's doing an incredible job of it, and Adeyeye and Callaway are not backing off whatsoever here. Well, you have to wait and see where it's going to be. The immovable object or the unstoppable force that ends up winning today. But right now, it does seem to be the immovable object that is just holding on for time being. And then 8 seconds behind them is the AM lead at the moment. Shahi Zahair, the ITT West driver, is looking very happy in the lead of the class with an 8.3 second gap now to Blake Phillips, who unfortunately for him is on average just about 3 to 4 tenths a second a lap slower. And therefore that is really the delta between them. And Phillips, well, he's close in terms of he's close to see Shahi Zahair down the road, but he's not close enough to really consider being competitive versus him. And it's Mark Senegal a further 12.3 seconds back. And Senegal right now just trying to hold on to third place with Julian Jones behind, albeit all these drivers have yet to pit, and we'll have to wait and see exactly where the pit stops throw them into the running pack, because of course we have had several pit stops. But meanwhile, into the pits comes Matt Best from the lead of the race. David Adeyemi then takes the lead, but you'll know that the fuel tank is not going to be too long for this earth, and therefore as they make the way on down, will Best pits. But now for Adeyemi and Callaway, this has got to be the best possible lap they've done in the race. They've got to go purple here, or as close as possible to it, because otherwise Best will be getting the undercut on them. We also do have to wonder where is some of our other drivers in amongst all of this, particularly where is none other than Blake Phillips going to be, because he stays out and Shahi Zahair comes into the pit lane, so he decides to go one extra lap. And I wonder whether fuel saving here might be helping some drivers out. Perhaps they've opted to fuel save to be able to give themselves the biggest window in which to pit, whereby they're able to react better to the conditions. Particularly in races where you have the risk of conditions. Oh, that's a big power slide there from Blake Phillips. The car slides loose out of turn number 2. My goodness. And well, somehow catching that. Well done, that man. And well, Shahi emerges out of the pit lane, and he returns to the racing in 7th overall, third in AM class. But keep in mind, Mark Senegal, who's up the road from him, has yet to pit as well, as is Blake Phillips. So therefore, the theory would be that Zahair will return to the lead of the AM class once all the pit stops are done, and that lead would be 4th place on the road. So we've still got a bit more strategic shuffling to go. But 6 minutes left on the clock here. We've not got long left in the day to do it. These fuel tanks have gone quite a bit of the distance today, and I do have to wonder whether anybody did consider at one point trying to go for the no stop here, given the fact they're able to make these fuel tanks go at least 29 minutes, as David Adeyemi makes one through and decides not to pit again. So Adeyemi right now, is he going for it? I do wonder, although the pace would suggest he's not. He's going to have to come into the pits at some point, because he's been matching the leader's pace all the way through. He's been fighting hard, but right now, if he was to pull this off, this would be an incredible piece of strategy, as Callaway comes on in. But ITT West has split the strategies, but they've done it in the reverse order here. They've decided to get Best and Texas Speed Sim Racing to go for the undercut, and instead they're sending one driver in to react. That's Callaway then coming to his pit stop now, as Blake Phillips heads on down, but Best comes out the final quarter here with the ultimate undercut strategy. And meanwhile, Adeyemi is going for the overcut as he sets a purple first sector, does Adeyemi. So Adeyemi right now knows that it's the one lap that matters most, as Callaway comes out the pits, but it hasn't worked out there for Callaway. He comes out behind Best, but perhaps that was to be expected. But as he does so, he's also got there just a little bit further behind Julian Jones, is gradually marshalling his way forward, as meanwhile Shahi Zahair has come back out, your AM leader then, with Blake Phillips leaving the pit lane now. So look at my commentary booth window, Mark Senegal's in, so Shahi Zahair in the end at the undercut covered off nicely the threat of Blake Phillips. But Phillips, in fact, make no mistake, has closed that gap down by 3 seconds in the pit lane. A brilliant pit stop for the Little Pit Club Sim Racing team, and well, you can imagine right now they must be thinking to themselves, particularly Blake Phillips, if only they were a bit closer on the first stint, could they have leapfrogged their way ahead of Zahair and then put themselves in a defensive posture for the remainder of the race? That'll always be a big what-if question, but Zahair's pace here has been the dominant factor in the AM class, as meanwhile, at the front of the field, Adeyemi comes into the pits with 4.5 minutes left. He can't make the fuel tank go any longer. It's done 20 laps, this car, and I can imagine that fuel gauge is practically on 0, and it may even be spluttering as he makes his way onto the pit limiter here. But where is Best? There he is. There's Callaway behind. So Callaway, in fact, has lost out a bit. As a result, the pit stop, the gap has opened to Callaway to 2.1 seconds. But Best right now needs to try and get the job done as we look to the blimp camera. That gives you an idea. There's Best. And here's Adeyemi making his way to a standstill now. He's literally at the end of the pit lane. That's the best possible place you could ask for. But here comes Best down the start-finish straight. Adeyemi is now getting up to speed. And for David Adeyemi, it's a quick stop. It's only 5.3 seconds and the lead swaps hands. Or does it? As here comes Best. He's going to be full momentum here into turn 1, but he's got to try and go up the inside into 2. But Adeyemi sees him him coming and says, no, you don't. And in the end, the lead swaps hands for now, but Best has got the tyre temperature. He's got this lap to try and make the move stick. He's got to seize the advantage here, because if he doesn't, it'll be a level playing field. And for Addy right now, he's got to back Best into Callaway as much as possible. IT West here need to pull this off, and he goes a bit deep. There's contact between the two of them. They both catch the cars. Best there just tapping the rear Addy. Callaway still now very close here as they make the way up the rise. There is Callaway. He's caught up massively. Can Best be under pressure here? I think he can. It's going to be Callaway down the inside as Addy right now shares the slipstream to the two drivers. He wants his teammate to help out, and into the brakes they go, but as he does, gets very on the brakes. Callaway's right there, taps Addy. It's still war between the two teammates. It's 3 wide into turn 6, but in the end, Best backs off. But here comes Callaway looking around the outside. Addy has to go defensive. My goodness, right now, this is absolutely exploded on top screens with 3 minutes left to go. Here comes Best back at them as they head in towards turn number 8. Best right now is absolutely loving this. He's thinking to himself, right, 2 teammates not working together. I can really get stuck into the fight here, but Callaway's still with him. And it seems now that Addy's been able to get himself settled down again, and Best is elbowed out wide there through turn number 9, albeit in terms of where he's on track, not actual contact between the two cars, and Jaden Callaway moves into second place, and in the end Best falls down into third. But what a lap, what a series of events, and we've got 2 more laps to go here before this is all said and done. But David Addy, after a late pit stop and the shortest pit stop of everybody, has made his way into the lead of this race ahead of Jaden Callaway, who has fought his way through into second, if not taken the lead of this. And Matt Best, meanwhile, is sitting very unhappily right now, I can imagine, in third place, knowing that he needs to now try and find a way to get back into this. But has he got any tyre life left? Has he exhausted it all? Has he exhausted his own energy here? This is the battle that's on circuit that we're going to stay with all the way to the end. Everywhere else has settled down for at least the part at the moment, albeit we are keeping an eye on the battle for 4th place in the AM class, or 9th overall between Kyle Peterson and Jermaine Warren, because Warren is closing very quickly on Peterson at approximately what is about 7/10 of a second elapsed. They may be together towards the very end of this race. Here they are on screen. There's Peterson, and then here is Jermaine Warren, who's absolutely roaring on around the circuit. And in fact, last lap, he was 1.5 seconds faster. If he repeats that, he will be attacking on the final lap. We'll have to wait and see whether he can do it or not. As meanwhile, unfortunately, we have had a third retirement from this race of Billman DaCosta. Bear Pope 0 with a double retirement now. But meanwhile, on the penultimate lap of the race, Addy under major pressure from Jaden Callaway. It is all kicking off here at the very front of the field. And Callaway right now, well, there's definitely not a 1-2 agreement between these two drivers. They are absolutely going for it here. Indeed, no multi-21 moment at the moment. MOP Jaril mentions in the Twitch chat there. And indeed, I'm getting flashbacks to Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel at the Turkish Grand Prix back in 2009, if I remember correctly. But right now, we're here in 2025, and ITD West, they've no team orders here other than have fun and don't take each other out the race. And Jaden Callaway is very eager to try and take a win, but Addy, he holds track position, and with 30 seconds left on the clock, this will be the final time they dance around the Okayama International Circuit. Will it be a dance that Addy leads all the way to the conclusion of the orchestra? Well, here they come then in towards turn number 4. Matt Best just watches right now. He's got to pick the right time to attack here. He's got to be a bit closer, however, if he wants to be in striking distance. But it does seem as though the ITD West drivers both just have a slight sliver of edge in pace, and that might be helping them out. In the battle for 4th in the AM class of Peterson and Warren, they've got onto their final, well, they will be coming onto their final lap shortly. They're 1.5 seconds separated. I think there will be an opportunity for Warren to go on the attack towards the end of the final lap. As meanwhile, that's very close there as Addy goes deep. And I think that's by design there at turn number 5. It gives him the defensive line in towards turn number 6. And Callaway there being lured into the trap, which Addy set, which is simply forced him to then have to look around the outside at turn number 6. Addy playing smart here. If he can't beat a driver on pace, he can beat him in terms of where he puts the car. And he's thinking 2 quarters in advance here as Addy. And as they head up the hill right now, will Best looking for a move around the outside at turn 9, but Callaway says no you don't. And as they head around the final corner, the clock strikes 0, and that means, ladies and gentlemen, when they head through these last 2 quarters, the checker flag will await them. But for David Addy, what a race it has been. If he couldn't lead on circuit, he's led on strategy, and that's how it's going to end as David Addy takes victory here for ITD West at the Okayama International Circuit. But who will be second? It'll be his teammate Jaden Callaway, head of Matt Best for Texas Speed Sim Racing. And then in the AM class, it is going to be another class win of the season, 4th overall for ITD West Shahi Zahair, who right now makes himself the favourite in the AM Championship without a doubt. Blake Phillips will have to settle for 5th overall and 2nd in class, with the AM driver there having the pace to make sure he's on the podium, but not to change the hair here today. And then we will have a 12.3 second gap back to Julian Jones, who brings on home 6th place there and the 4th best of the pros, but does so in a very comfortable run in the end for ITD West, before we then do get to Mark Senegal in the rear of the picture, who is going to come across the line as the 3rd and final finisher on the AM podium, 7th overall, but need to know where he can find the pace, because right now he needs to get closer to Zaire Phillips if he wants to be in contention for the AM title. Daniel McConnell, he takes a season best performance there with 8th overall and 5th in the pro class, and between Carl Peterson and Jermaine Warren, one was catching. He's there right in the final corner, but I think for the Caboose Crew driver, he's going to hold on here on his return to take a 4th place in the AM class there and 9th overall. Well done to him, with Jermaine Warren having to settle for 5th and decides to come across the finish line in style there, and well, the team won't be too happy about that as he finishes 10th, 5th in the AM class and with a hefty repair bill to boot. But then it'll be your last lead lap finisher, ladies and gentlemen, of not Tom Bryce, I apologise, Glenn Bratton, who will take 11th place as he comes across the line of the privateer, and it'll be Tom Bryce who finishes a lap down in the end, but give them all around their applause. What a race. And in the end, it was a wet circuit that has dried for the most part here in Japan, but the small puddles in qualifying and in the early stage of the race just made it even more tantalisingly tricky to master. But for our drivers, they put on an absolute demonstration of their mastery of the Porsche Cup cars and evolving conditions, and we have had a phenomenal round number 6. Shahi Zahir makes his way into the pit lane to celebrate his AM victory with the team. Well, let's look to the scenic view, and with it, those race results subject to Eddie Steward's inquiries, and here they are. And after an absolutely incredible 35 minutes of racing here at the Okayama International Circuit today, we saw David Addy provisionally, subject to any Steward's inquiries for all these results, of course, not saying there will be any. We have seen David Addy take his first win of the season, and the IT West Senior Vice President's driver absolutely delivering here today in the number 32. And what a monster drive in the end. Albeit he was not the dominant driver, he had to fight incredibly hard, but fight hard he did, and in the end he found a way to the very top. IT West Jaden Calloway followed through to make it a 1-2 for the team, with Matt Best there for Texas Speed Sim Racing rounding off your overall podium, and also the pro podium with it. But he'll be a bit gutted not to be on the very top, but he'll know that his championship lead, it will have been cut, but not by much, as he continues to lead the pro championship then into round number 7. Shahi Zahir, 4th place and AM victory. The IT West Senior Vice President's driver will be absolutely ecstatic about that, now making it 5 wins this season. And right now for the 209 driver, is there anybody who'd stop his winning ways other than Blake Phillips, who unfortunately was not on the pace today and had to settle for 2nd place in the AM class, but 5th overall. Some big points there for the Pit Club Sim Racing driver, but not the score he'll want. He'll want the wins, and therefore he'll need to come back stronger and Motegi in a week's time. Julian Jones took 6th there for IT West Interns Pro Esports Division in a race that was a bit of a lonely one after some opening action, but in the end really the 6th fastest of the field today, and it showed with a 9-second gap there to Mark Senegal, who finished in 7th for Sunday GT Turtles and was the final finisher on the AM podium. Daniel McConnell took 8th place there for Texas Speed Sim Racing with an absolutely firm drive, and indeed a season best result, with Carl Peterson in 9th place in the end for Caboose Crew ahead of Jermaine Warren. And what a run-in it was to the very end, but Peterson doing enough to hold on, and on a return to the grid, a 4th place in the AM class, he'll be very happy with that. Jermaine Warren will be a bit gutted there wasn't an extra lap in the race, because he was closing rapidly but had to settle for 5th in AM and 10 overall. But in the middle of the pack racing drive, the privateer giving way to fellow privateer of Glenn Bratton, who was best of the rest, with Tom Bryce your last finisher, a lap down the end for IT West Interns Pro Esports Division, but seeing that checkered flag. Commiserations to Billman DaCosta, James Logston and Anthony Piper, with all 3 drivers home to retire from the race. But for the Bear Pope Zero driver, Billman DaCosta, he will be a Class 5 finisher, as he did retire within 3 laps of the race winner, and therefore, so long as he finishes the race technically within 5 laps of the winner, he will be classified and bring home some points. But not so for James Logston, nor for Anthony Piper, who had technical issues with the car and could not make it onto the grid, unfortunately, but we hope to see him back in a week's time. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our rundown of the results for round number 6 of the Fall Into Porsche Cup Championship for 2025, as hosted by the Middle of the Pack Racing League. And that can only now mean one thing. Simply put, it is time for us to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching. If you have enjoyed today's show and you're looking forward to plenty more racing at the Middle of the Pack Racing League community, or perhaps you want to be on the grid with us, all that and more, and to stay up to date with the latest updates in the community, we do recommend you check out firstly the official Discord. Invite link available on screen as displayed, and you'll not find a more friendly sim racing community as operated out the North American continent. However, all Middle of the Pack Racing League series are global and you can join from anywhere in the world. You do not have to be based on the North American continent, and we have seen drivers from all around the globe take part over the last 4 years, and indeed we'd love to have you on the grid. Alternatively, if you're more of a social media person, you can of course follow us on Twitter, and that's at twitter.com/MOP Racing, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news and announcements for the Middle of the Pack Racing League. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, only 2 rounds remain, and in a week's time, we stay in Japan, but we make our way to the Mobility Resort Motegi for our final sprint race round of the season. And whilst the racing will occur on what will be Wednesday, the 19th of November 2025, we invite you to come join us as if it were live on Saturday, the 22nd of November, as we will see whether our Pro and AM Drivers' Championship leaders can potentially wrap up proceedings with a round to spare. Because whilst Matt Best may have finished third today versus his IT West counterparts, his championship lead means he just needs one big result to perhaps seal the deal before we do head to our season finale at Phillip Island. And as for Shahi Zahair, well, he needs a big result and his rivals to fall short. However, it could all toss and turn, and we do know that Blake Phillips and Mark Senegal will be very eager to return to winning ways as quickly as they possibly can. But we'll have to find out in a week's time how it all continues. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, we have been the Middle of the Pack Racing League. I've been your host and commentator, Paul Walsh, also known as TX1 or Britain and Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And until next time, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, and most importantly, as always, like our drivers, ladies and gentlemen, remember to stay on track. Good night.